welcome to this explainer. Have you felt a really subtle but undeniable shift recently? It's that strange sensation where your career trajectory suddenly feels a lot less like a steady, predictable climb and, well, a lot more like a breathless sprint against a machine. If you've been feeling that pressure lately, let me tell you, you are completely justified. Today, we're unpacking an absolutely vital piece of source material that explores the concrete mathematical reality of what's being called the AI economic siphon. We're going to bypass all those generic headlines you see every day and dive straight into the hard calculations driving the modern labor market. These are the exact numbers determining who stays relevant and who, unfortunately, gets quietly priced right out.
So ask yourself, is your career literally racing a machine? It's a heavy, kind of uncomfortable question to sit with, but it's an entirely necessary one right now. When we see massive job cuts making the news, our default assumption, our comfort zone really, is that we're just witnessing standard corporate restructuring. Just the typical ebb and flow of the business cycle. Trimming the fat, as they say. But the sources we're analyzing today argue that something radically structural is happening just beneath the surface. This isn't about trimming the fat anymore. It's about fundamentally replacing the muscle. We are actively transitioning from a system reliant on human-driven output to one anchored by algorithmic output. And that shift, it alters the fundamental rules of the game for absolutely anyone who relies on a W-2 paycheck.
Section 1. The Invisible AI Siphon. Okay, let's put away the speculation for a minute and look strictly at the raw numbers driving today's economy. Our sources define the core mechanism behind this massive shift as an efficiency tax. Basically, it's an algorithmic siphon where AI implementation massively boosts corporate efficiency, but at the exact same time, it drains the overall pool of salary capital through job displacement. And the craziest part, it's an entirely invisible force. You're never going to see an efficiency tax line item deducted on your bi-weekly pay stub next to your state taxes, but it acts exactly like one, by steadily siphoning white-collar professionals right out of the active economy. Think about a middle management logistics department for a second. Just a few years ago, coordinating regional supply chains required a director and, say, a team of 5 highly paid analysts. Today, the sources detail how that exact same output is seamlessly handled by one director leveraging an enterprise-grade large language model. The company gets infinitely leaner and faster for sure, but the undeniable consequence is that 5 really lucrative salaries simply vanish from the economic ecosystem. Section 2. The 2026 Reality Check. Let's transition right into the hard data and projections provided by the financial professionals in our source text.
So check this out. In 2023, AI was responsible for just 3% of total layoffs. Noticeable? Sure, but relatively small in the grand scheme of things. Now by last year, that number climbed to 5%. But the aggressive projection for 2026, based on current data models, is just staggering. 10% of all layoffs will be directly driven by AI implementation. That is a shocking acceleration. We are watching a literal doubling of AI-related job losses in an incredibly condensed, almost unprecedented time frame. So why the sudden spike? Well, the sources point out that early enterprise AI adoption cycles, the pilot programs and the beta tests, they're maturing into full-scale deployments now. The experimental phase is officially over, and the implementation phase is ramping up aggressively, permanently altering what a workforce even looks like. This source material actually summarizes this mathematical reality with a really stark observation. It says, while politicians talk about progress, white-collar professionals are being siphoned out of the economy by algorithms. It's a fascinating juxtaposition to think about. On one hand, you have the loud public theater of technological progress, this universally broadcast idea that AI is this magical rising tide lifting all boats. But on the other hand, you have the quiet, raw mathematical reality that this progress is acting as a direct, aggressive siphon. It is literally pulling the financial rug right out from under the established white-collar class. We're looking at impartial data that reveals a massive, growing disconnect between the optimistic public narrative and the brutal economic reality on the ground. Section 3. The Efficiency Trap. The landscape is actually shifting again as AI begins actively merging with physical automation. We're faced with a really fascinating dichotomy here. AI undoubtedly boosts corporate profit while simultaneously draining household income. A corporate CFO's absolute dream scenario is unfortunately the exact same mathematical event as an everyday household budget's worst nightmare. For a corporation, the math is just beautiful. AI drives efficiency up to the ceiling and labor costs down to the floor, triggering a massive financial win for shareholders. But for the everyday individual relying on a steady salary to pay a mortgage, that exact same mechanism ruthlessly squeezes their earning potential.
It's a singular technological event, but it's being experienced from two entirely different, opposing financial realities. For a while, the comfortable consensus was that this was strictly a white-collar problem. The primary sectors taking the initial hit from the siphon were pretty clearly defined: tech, education, and healthcare. But the trap is rapidly expanding. Because AI is now successfully merging with physical automation, blue-collar jobs are becoming newly threatened sectors too. The sources explicitly warn us that the siphon is no longer confined to cubicles and spreadsheets. Nope, it's moving right onto the warehouse floor, with AI-driven robotics sorting inventory, and straight into the logistics chain with the deployment of autonomous long-haul trucking. The boundaries are totally dissolving. Nobody, regardless of whether they wear a suit or a hard hat to work, is fully insulated from the underlying math anymore. Section 4. Protecting your income. So given the trajectory of all this data, how exactly do we respond and financially survive?
Well, the defensive playbook of the past is officially obsolete. Cutting expenses is simply no longer enough. Historically, when the broader economy tightened up, the standard, responsible strategy was to just tighten your belt, cancel a few subscriptions, eat out a little less, push back a vacation, and save a bit more. But the sources argue an absolutely critical point here. You cannot simply frugality your way out of a structural labor siphon. When the actual earning potential of your entire chosen profession is being permanently, systematically compressed by an efficiency tax, defensive budgeting strategies will eventually, mathematically, fail. A completely proactive strategy is required if you want to stay afloat. That proactive strategy breaks down into an explicit two-step mandate from our source text. Step 1. Grow your income. You have to actively outpace the siphon by finding entirely new, scalable ways to generate revenue, rather than just fiercely guarding what you currently have. Step 2. Own the assets AI helps. Honestly, this is the true linchpin of the entire strategy. If AI is funneling all this efficiency into massive corporate profit, the only viable way to insulate yourself is to shift your position. You must transition from being the labor that AI replaces to being the owner of the assets that AI mathematically accelerates. The sources point to tangible examples of this too, like building a lean, personal, automated business utilizing AI toolkits, or deliberately rotating your investment portfolio into the equities of companies that are leading the enterprise automation charge. You absolutely have to get yourself on the right side of the algorithmic equation. So I'll leave you with this. Are you trusting the theater or the math? The public narrative will happily continue to debate the ethics of this transition, endlessly arguing over whether AI is a progressive miracle or a destructive force. But as the source material makes incredibly clear, the math simply does not care about the narrative. The efficiency tax is actively collecting right now, and the great wealth transfer from human labor to AI-assisted assets is already well underway. The absolute best way to survive the siphon is to look squarely at the unfeeling numbers, ignore the noise, and fundamentally adjust your financial strategy today. The siphon is here. Position yourself accordingly.